The Saints Row reboot was a complete and utter disaster, and it was really no surprise to see why. Volition decided to go in an extremely different direction than all of the previous games, and they got rid of what made the franchise so successful in the first place. But now we're finding out that apparently the Saints Row reboot was supposed to star the original Saints, and it sounds 100 times better than the garbage we ended up getting. I have a few different things that I want to show off, but before we get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, follow me on social media, and consider supporting through Patreon or via YouTube memberships. So funny enough, this is an article from The Gamer, and it's ironic that The Gamer is putting out this talking about a version of the Saints Row reboot that people might have actually liked better, while being one of the outlets that defended it and called us names for not liking the cringy woke reboot. I thought that that was pretty hilarious, but it says a reliable Saints Row insider has claimed that the original version of the reboot not only featured all of the original Saints, but also let the players finally kill Dex from the original game. One of the most depressing gaming failures over the last few years was Volition's 2020 Saints Row reboot, which threw away both its gangster origins and its more wacky side from Saints Row the 3rd and the 4th. Now, I do want to note that they say the 2020 Saints Row reboot because I think they're referring to when it was officially announced, but this game didn't end up coming out until 2022, so I don't know if this is just bad journalism or they're trying to refer to the fact that it was announced in 2020, but it says instead it focused on broke college students who were supposed to be viewed as quirky heroes while they went around shooting everything in sight. Combine that with janky shooting and a lack of any personality from the previous games, and it resulted in one big disappointment. And yes, nobody wanted to play a game where you're broke college students and the reason why you're committing crimes is because you're trying to pay off your student loans. Like, that is just not a good story in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, like if you had a bunch of the original Saints and you had this newbie and that might have been like one of their side stories, it could have been like okay, it could have been comedic in certain ways, but when it's like all of the characters, they're all doing this together for the same reason, and they really have no personality, it just ended up being this cringy disaster. And I hate using the word cringy, but it is the perfect word to describe this whole entire game. This title did not have any resemblance to the Saints Rows of the past. I mean, Saints Row was known as being Grand Theft Auto's little bro for a reason, and people were excited for this reboot because we were all hoping that while we were waiting many years for GTA 6 to finally release, we were actually going to have that good experience again to hold us over. And unfortunately, we got nothing close to that. I mean, even when they released the first teasers and trailers for this reboot, they got absolutely annihilated by gamers, but once it came out, it was like 100 times worse than we all could have expected, because it's not even like it was a technical masterpiece. Like, the gameplay was amazing and all of the mechanics, like the driving was really fine-tuned, and there were awesome new unique types of like side missions. They did not do anything unique with this game, and they really released like a piece of buggy and broken software and expected us to still swipe our credit cards for it. There's just no way that this deserved even a $30 price tag, let alone a $71. But it says it seems like the original vision for the Saints Row reboot was something more in line with what fans had been asking for. An anonymous Volition developer previously confirmed that the game was supposed to be a sequel that followed on from Saints Row 4's ending, but more details about the project have since come out. I did talk about this in a previous video because, of course, I've covered the Saints Row reboot quite a lot on the channel, but from what we're hearing, it was supposed to be very close to what fans originally originally wanted. The latest information on what the Saints Row reboot was originally supposed to be comes from a reliable insider, Mr. Saints Godzilla 21, who was one of the biggest Saints Row YouTubers back in the game's heyday. In their latest video, which goes over Volition's closure and the development of the reboot, they claim that most of the big problems with the game can be pinned on Deep Silver instead of Volition, including the infamous social media posts that made fun of fans when they said they didn't like the new approach. Now, we will never know if this is definite or not, because as it says, this is a YouTuber who used to be very heavily involved in the Saints Row community, so I would still take this with a grain of salt, because this individual could be, pinning a lot of the blame on Deep Silver. It is definitely a claim we have heard from, at this point, 3 different sources, so I do believe it to some extent, but at the same time, Volition is still the developers of this game. They are still the ones who ultimately created this product. And if you put, say, the story aside, because maybe they were heavily, pushed in one direction, the game itself was still a buggy and broken mess. They had to fix hundreds of bugs and glitches within the first few weeks of launch. The combat was very janky. The driving was very janky. Again, they did not do anything very unique with any elements of this game. So story even aside, this game wasn't, great in every other way. It says that isn't all, though, as they also claim that for a decent portion of the reboot's development, Johnny, Dex, Shondi, Pierce, and Aisha were all going to be the main Saints in the game. Mike Watson, a known Saints Row modder, was also reportedly in charge of making a mission for the new game that finally let players properly kill Dex, and this would have been so amazing. This would have been, honestly, such a successful reboot if they simply did not shove all of the woke dialogue into it and make all of these extremely cringy characters that nobody cared about. If they had kept it with the original Saints and given you a way to do something as simple as properly killing Dex, people would have been so happy, because this is something that had been teased since Saints Row 2 and they never delivered on it. So this would have fulfilled so many Saints Row players' requests with just 1 or 2 simple quest lines. And the fact that this was an idea that was on the table and this isn't what we gotten will always be such a massive miss, because this is what a lot of players would have been super happy to support. That's all that we really wanted at the end of the day, was for them to respect the original Saints, maybe bring them back and try to continue what made Saints Row so successful in the first place. And unfortunately, they did not do that. I mean, yes, there is definitely a possibility that this was Volition's original plan that ended up being scrapped because Deep Silver was pushing the team in a new direction, and we will never know both sides of the story. It's not like we will ever get official confirmation, but one would assume that the Volition, after making so many Saints Row games, would have went, you know what, let's try to make something that is going to be successful and try to bring maybe even half of the original Saints back, and that just did not end up happening. It, at the end of the day, though, doesn't really matter, because this isn't the game that we got. We are never, at least for the foreseeable future, going to get another Saints Row game. Maybe in many, many years we will get another Saints Row game, but nowhere close to now. I mean, that's for sure, nowhere in the near future. And ultimately, the Saints Row reboot is still the game that ended up coming out in 2022. It was a complete and utter joke. They absolutely shit on Saints Row fans, and it was just a disaster all around. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this and of course found it important and informative, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.